Hello and welcome to the TAXIWAY podcast, your main hub for Las Vegas Aviators baseball. My name's Fabian, a lifelong fan of Las Vegas baseball from the 51s all the way to the Aviators. And today we're going to be talking about the starting pitching probables for the Las Vegas Aviators. The rotation hasn't been set in stone, but based on past appearances, we're going to guess on who's going to be a part of the starting rotation. And before we talk about these players, I think it's important to define some of the stats that we're going to be using because not everybody spent the last week or so delving into these numbers. So the first advanced stat, because all these are advanced stats, -1. So these go deeper than ERA, they go deeper than wins and losses, all the basic stats, averages, deeper than that. The first advanced stat that we're going to be talking about is FIP, Fielding Independent Pitching. So FIP, the stat, is an attempt to isolate the performance of the pitcher by using only those outcomes we know do not involve luck on balls in play or defense. So basically this limits it to strikeouts, walks, hit batters, and home runs allowed, and that's per Fangraphs. Next advanced stat that we're going to be talking about is batting average on balls in play, aka BABIP. So BABIP, it basically is trying to say, pitchers that have a high value in this stat are most likely victims of poor defense or bad luck, and the pitcher can't control those things. So their own defense might be attached to it, but their luck isn't. So meaning that when a pitcher has extreme BABIP values, we're expecting those values to go back to league average because it's trying to remove the luck aspect of this game. When the BABIP goes down, the ERA might go up, right? Or if they have an extremely low BABIP and it goes back to average, then the ERA might go down. So BABIP is an interesting stat. Next, this one's more of a basic one. It's on base percentage, but from the pitcher's point of view, it basically measures how frequently a batter reaches per plate appearance. And these times, they include hits, walks, hit by pitches, but they don't include errors. Times reached on a fielder's choice or a drop third strike, and that one's per MLB.com. Next stat that we have is WHIP, aka walks and hits per innings pitched. So if you've played MLB The Show, if you've, wanted to look at the stats of your favorite pitcher up in the bigs, I'm pretty sure you've seen this stat. Per MLB.com, this stat shows how well the pitcher has kept runners off the base paths. So the lower this number is, the fewer runners are on the bases while this pitcher is pitching. So now that we've gone over those definitions, I think we're going to get to the main event, and we're going to start talking about these pitchers. So the first pitcher that we're going to be talking about is Blake Beers. He had numerous starts last season, and we can see from last season he had an ERA of 4.19. Hitters on base percentage against him was .339. He had an average of 9 strikeouts per 9 innings, around 3 walks per 9 innings, and a FIP of 5.71. So we can see that the defense helped him tremendously last year. So if the defense isn't as good this season, his ERA might go up, but from what I can tell, the defense is going to remain largely the same. But let's look at Blake Beers and his last several outings. So let's take a look at September, because that's where the season ended. He had a record of 0-2, so 0 wins, 2 losses, an ERA of 5.94 in 4 games, and of those 4 games, he started 4. Across 16 and 2/3 innings, he allowed 11 runs and 4 home runs, 2 hit by pitches, and 5 walks, and a total of 19 strikeouts. And the ERA can be it looks pretty inflated because of one really rough outing in Reno in September. He allowed 6 runs, and he didn't finish 2 innings. So he went 1 and then got 2 out of 3 in the next inning. Not a decent start, but not every start can be the best. But other than that, he did pretty well, minus that one really bad start. So hopefully pick it up for next season, because in his last appearance last season, he went 5 innings, he allowed 2 runs, and struck out 7. So we can see that he does have the stuff to strike people out, get people out, and go at least 5. And that's, at the minor league level, that's basically what you want to be aiming for. I also have his prospects savant page up. So one thing that this page highlights that he does well is that he doesn't walk many people. And that's really the main thing that it highlights. And we can briefly go over his pitching arsenal, meaning the types of pitches that he's going to be throwing per appearance. So he's got the 4-seamer, and it'll top out around 94 miles an hour. Got the sweeper, it'll go at 81, 82, the slider at 89, splitter at 86, the curve at 82, and a sinker at 89. And there's also a scout page on Fangraphs. And one thing that the scouts really liked about Blake Beers, granted this was in 2022, but they really liked his slider. So I imagine that his approach to batters will focus on that slider being a put-away pitch or something along those lines, because over 3 years, a little more than 3 years, I imagine that his approaches have changed. So hopefully he can keep on developing that slider and being able to limit the hard contact and to limit the amount of walks, because in his last 4 starts in September, he allowed 1 home run each game. So hopefully coming down to Vegas for next season, he'll be able to limit that. But one thing that I do want to preface this is that Las Vegas, I don't know if it's Las Vegas, but in the broader sense, the Pacific Coast League is brutal toward pitchers. So you miss a pitch, you mess up, and you have something hanging over the middle of the plate, it's more than likely going to get out of the yard. So that's also something that we should also think about, is that it's a very hitter-friendly league. So maybe allowing home runs isn't necessarily as bad at the minor league level than it would be at the major league level, just depending on the league and the stadiums that you're playing at. But if you've ever been to Las Vegas ballpark, more often than not, we're going to have at least 1 home run a game. So it's not unheard of. But I think that it would look nice on his resume if he limits the amount of home runs that he gives up. The next pitcher that we're going to be talking about is Jorge Marcheco. We talked about him briefly in the last episode. He was acquired from the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, and during their Rule 5 draft, he was in their single A team, but the A's drafted him to be a part of the Aviators for this season. So no matter what, he's going to be an Aviator for the whole season or most of the season, just because of those Rule 5 draft rules. So last season, he had a 4.36 ERA. Hitters on base percentage against him was .293. He had an average of 9 strikeouts per 9 innings, closer to 2.5 walks per 9 innings, a FIP of 4.7, and he allowed 1.5 home runs per 9 innings. Now, it's hard to really see how he's going to be doing for how he's going to be doing next season because he didn't play a full season last season. His last games were in August before he was placed on the development list. And as a reminder, the development list, it just allows this player to work on their mechanics or anything the team feels that he needs to work on. But in return, they can't play in any games. They're still part of the team, but they can't play in any games. From the games that he did play, in August, he wasn't getting deep into these games. The deepest that he went in during that stretch was only 3 innings. The month before, 4 innings. The month before that, 4 innings. So I'm not expecting him to go deep into these games heading into this season, especially since it's been a long time since the last time that he's played in a professional game at any level. So hopefully going into this season, hopefully he's gotten in contact with somebody to really freshen up his mechanics so that he can go deeper into these games. Because another stat that I was looking at was it was measuring about how many pitches he was throwing per inning, and he was throwing at least 16 pitches per inning, and that's not ideal, especially if you want to be a starter. Because if you're a reliever, you're coming in late in a game. Basically, your job is to just empty out the tank, and do your job for like 1 inning, maybe 2. So it doesn't really matter for relievers, but when you're a starter, you don't want to be on the high average of pitches. So I don't know if the teams that he was with just wanted to limit the amount of pitches he was throwing for the season or something like that. Because on some of these starts, like he only allowed 1 run. So I don't know if it was just because his pitch count got too high and they were just like, okay, we don't want to burn you out. So hopefully we'll get a clearer picture of who he is as a player during this next season. And then let me see if this page provides anything for his arsenal. So this page doesn't really talk about his arsenal that much. And that's the thing about minor league baseball is that sometimes that information isn't readily accessible. So I guess we'll be in for a surprise once he comes up to AAA and plays for Vegas. The next player that we're going to be talking about is Kade Morris, the number 15 ranked prospect in the athletics organization, drafted in 2023 by the Mets. So it was a good steal from the Mets. I would say that we finessed them. So last season, he posted a 4.38 ERA. Batters were getting on base. Hit their on base percent was .330. Strikeouts per 9 hovering around 7.7. Walks per 9 hovering around 2.9. His FIP was 4.14, so it didn't really deviate from his ERA, which is a good sign. And his home runs per 9 was less than 1, so that's pretty good considering that he's pitching at a very hitter-friendly league. So let's talk about how he did in September. So for those of you who followed Aviators baseball last season, he made a really good appearance during the postseason where he went 7 innings. He struck out 2, and he only allowed 1 run and off a home run. But that's a pretty solid start. If you're going 7 innings and you're only allowing 1, that's pretty high caliber stuff because in the month of September, he was pretty lights out. So let me go back to the regular season tab for Kade. Because in the month of September, albeit he had 3 appearances, but 2 wins, no losses, a 1.59 ERA across 17 innings, only allowed 3 runs, and he had 19 strikeouts. With his last regular season appearance, he went 6 and he had 7 strikeouts. So he went absolutely ballistic in September. And that's something that we can expect from Kade. Like more often than not, he'll go 5 or 6 innings which is pretty amazing. And the prospect savant page that I'm looking at here, it highlights how he doesn't walk many guys, and yeah, that's pretty much what they highlight, is his ability to not walk a lot of guys, which is, I mean, it goes a long way, because the less free bases that you give up, the harder it is for the other team to capitalize on your mistakes. And let's talk a little bit about his arsenal. So the pitch that he used the most last season was a sinker, followed by the four-seam fastball, then the slider, then the sweeper, then the curve, then the changeup. His sinker and fastball have roughly the same velocity on them, hovering around 95. And that's actually pretty great, because if you're a hitter and you see something at the same speed, but then you see the pitch just dive, that can be pretty deceptive. And if we look at his scouting report, and it was updated for last season, it says Morris has great breaking stuff and has now thrown strikes through high A. So he's a high-floored back-end starter prospect. And that's a pretty good sign. I mean, even though they didn't rate his stuff all that high, the scouts still think that he's going to be good enough to be, he's going to have a high floor, which, from what I've seen, just watching him, it is pretty exciting. The next player that we're going to be talking about is Zane Taylor, and he was drafted in 2025. And we also don't have a lot of information about him at the pro level, because the A's, right after drafting him, they wanted to throw him in the deep end of the pool and see how he does against AAA competition. So these guys are right on the threshold of the major leagues. And can you guess how Mr. Taylor did? In September, a 0 ERA. He did not allow any runs. He pitched for 2 innings and he struck out 4. And that was his only outing. So we only got a taste of Mr. Taylor. We can look at his fan graphs here. Let me pull it up. So Zane Taylor, he's not going to blow anybody away with his fastball. It looks like he topped out at 94. He also has a slider and a changeup. But something that the scouts really liked about him was his slider, and they're pretty confident that he's going to be pretty good with his command. So meaning where he wants it, that's where it's going to be. And honestly, when I'm thinking about the ideal pitcher, I don't really think about a flamethrower who throws 95 to 100. Well, I guess 95 is like the old baseball way of thinking what a flamethrower is. I guess more modern baseball is throwing high 90s, like 98 to 100 plus. I don't really place a lot of value in velocity, because I think velocity is great, but I value command a lot more. Because if you can be deceptive with your pitches and you can dot something up right on the corner, I in my mind, that has a lot more value than, having your manager need to take aspirin because of how much traffic is on the base paths. And for me, I'm a young guy. Why would I need to take aspirin every time I see a wild flamethrower on the mound where he's walking everybody and he just happens to strike out the side? Like, I like my excitement, but for me, that's a little bit too much. So I prefer the command. I prefer finesse. I prefer the movement, being very nasty with your pitches. I prefer that. But I do see that there's also value in being a flamethrower. And talking about flamethrowers, we're going to go to our next pitcher. His name is Yunior Tur. He actually saw some playing time for the Aviators last season. Let me look at his game logs here. So in his last several outings in September, he had a 0 wins, 1 loss with a 6.39 ERA across 12 and 2/3 innings pitched, where he gave up 10 runs, but 9 of them earned, 1 home run, he hit 1 batter, and he walked 6. And he ended the month with 16 strikeouts. His best start came on September 16th against the Salt Lake Bees, where he went 5 innings, only allowed 2 hits, no runs, 2 walks, and 8 strikeouts. So we can see from that one outing, and I believe that was his second start of that month. Like he had 5 appearances, but he only had 3 starts. But we can see that he has the ability to perform at an elite level with other AAA prospects and really wheel and deal and strike out 8 and go 5. So I hope we can see a lot more of that. Looking at his Prospect Savant page, he is pretty highly rated on Prospect Savant. So he limits the amount of hard hit balls, has a low exit velocity when batters do end up hitting the ball. It's just pretty good. Like he's not allowing them to have really good swings off of his pitches. But granted, it's a very small sample size because that was his only month of AAA competition. Most of his performances were in AA, where he did well. But you know, there's going to be an obvious difference in competition. But we can see that he has the stuff. He can do it. So all in all, I think that Kade Morris will be the ace of the staff, followed by I think it's going to be a little hard to determine like who will be like the 2, 3, 4, and 5. Because besides Blake Beers, we don't really have enough information on the other guys that are supposed to be a part of the rotation. So we'll see how that plays out. But we're going to have Kade Morris, we're going to have Blake Beers, we're going to have Yunior Tur, we're going to have Zane Taylor, and then we're going to have Jorge Marcheco. So Beers, Marcheco, Morris, Taylor, Tur. But in my eyes, I see Kade Morris being at the top. For me, the most expectations that I have is for Zane Taylor. Like, I understand that he only had 1 outing for Vegas, but if you take a look at how he performed at UNC Wilmington, he was blowing everybody away at the college level, and for him to just, you know, jump into the AAA level and act like it's nothing, that's actually pretty great. And, you know, part of some of the articles that I was reading in preparation for this episode was that he was one of the higher rated pitchers in that season's draft. So for me, I want to see Taylor absolutely ball out in this next season. But what do you guys think? Do you guys believe in Morris heading this rotation? Do you guys think that Blake Beers is going to come back with a vengeance for next season? Do you think that our young guys of Tur and Marcheco making an impact, especially like Marcheco, where he hasn't been around since August? How amazing would that be if after all that time not facing professional competition and he just goes all out too? And he was playing high A ball last season. So I think that would be the biggest surprise for me, honestly, if Marcheco just goes out there and just blows everybody away. But that's basically all I have for today. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on Spotify, or if you're listening on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, share, and like. And I appreciate all of you for tuning in. And until next time, this has been the Taxiway podcast. My name is Fabian, and I hope you have a great day.